The 392nd edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down 1. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome to another live edition of the Four Corners podcast, coming at you live on a Monday night. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you once again to talk about, well, another miss for the Tar Heels in the transfer portal. They missed out earlier today on Adou Thiero, the wing stretch forward they were hoping to bring to Chapel Hill to replace Harrison Ingram. He's going to Arkansas to play for John Calipari. We're here to talk about that. What's next for Carolina, as we kind of alluded to a little bit last night, but even more so today. The staff just kind of has to take a deep breath, collect their thoughts, and then continue to evaluate the portal to find the type of talent that this roster needs to compete at the level that we want to compete at in 2024, 2025. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some other guys that this staff could and should turn their attention to replace Harrison Ingram after missing out on Thiero. But we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. And we've used this one by Roy Williams, I think, quite a handful of times, but I believe in it, and it's a good message, and it applies to where this program is today. And that pod thought is, quote, persistence prevails when all else fails. And failure might be too strong of a word to describe Carolina's performance in the transfer portal so far. But Carolina's landed just one transfer. And whether they've seriously recruited a number of them or not, they've been involved with enough to be upset that only one transfer's landed in Chapel Hill. And they've been involved with a number of the right type of transfers that, this fan base looked at it and said, yeah, that's a guy that we could use in Chapel Hill. They did their homework. They did their due diligence. And those guys aren't going to be playing for the Tar Heels for next season. With that, though, and it's a hard message to try to convey and to try to get home to a fan base that's upset about the lack of production in the portal, Carolina does have to be persistent, because the longer you keep at it, the more that you go to work every day, roll your sleeves up and do what you got to do. At some point, you're going to get a guy or two in here that'll make us feel better about this roster than we do right now. The expectation at Carolina is, to put together a Final Four caliber roster. I don't know if that's the case as of right now. even with R.J. Davis back for next season. I don't know.
Not even close.
I don't know if this is a roster I can look at and say is capable of making a Final Four. The good news is they've still got some time to add to the roster to make us feel better about that possibility. And while it's a hard thing for Carolina fans to hear, the best thing this staff can do is be persistent and trust what's worked the last couple off season, because the proof's in the pudding. And at some point, they're going to get the guys this program needs to compete at the highest level next year.
Yeah, you'd think so. I mean, this is persistence is probably the best quote that you could have picked out. And honestly, like, this is, as weird as it is, and many of the people that are potentially watching this probably have been in the same boat. This is very similar, to what people tell us in our dating lives, that persistence is what pays off. Don't give up, because that's when you're not going to find somebody. This honestly feels very similar. This is why it's hurting me so much. It feels like I'm back in high school with the amount of rejections that we've seen here recently. But it's just, I don't know, man. I think it's honestly just that these guys are not great fits for what Carolina is looking for. They're guys that on paper look really nice. They're guys that I think you look at and you think they fit the system really well. But I don't know if these are guys that fit what Carolina wants in terms of mindset, and really just in terms of willpower for what they're coming in to do. There's no beating around the bush. And I think, look, there are guys that, have gone to these other schools that are wanting to compete for national championships, but they're also wanting to make a significant amount of money. Everybody that plays this sport, your goal should be to win a national championship. And I think it is for most guys. But a lot of these guys that you've seen where they've landed, and then you hear about the NIL money that was offered to them, it makes a lot of sense why they are going there. This one, there's a lot of layers to this, because there are certain rumors that floated around with John Calipari. Basically, people have accused him of not submitting Thiero's name on time for the NBA draft, forcing him to stay in college. If that's actually true and he's still committed to him out of the transfer portal, you're talking about one of the wildest stories I think I've ever heard. That would just be absolutely insane, because this dude could have cost a guy a chance to make it to the NBA. I'm not saying that he would have been guaranteed to be drafted, just looking. I think he probably was seen as like a mid-second round guy, so he probably would have been drafted. But still, there's no guarantee that by him coming back, especially on the roster that he's going to be on at Arkansas, which is going to be loaded this year, that he's going to get a significant amount of playing time on that roster. If he still chose to go there, that would be amazing. But I think, maybe those rumors weren't true. He really just wanted to play for John Calipari, but we know the big reason why he went there. I've mentioned it. Arkansas is a school that has Jerry Jones in their NIL collective that's backing them, the Walton family, who owns Walmart, that is backing them, and the Tyson family, who owns Tyson Chicken Company, that is backing them. Those have to be three of the biggest boosters in all of college athletics, all in one athletic department. So, they are probably willing to pay an inordinate amount. I got to be honest, I don't even know if Carolina would have been the second choice to Thiero's hometown Pittsburgh Panthers, who are also supposedly willing to offer a lot of money. It would have been close to home. So this is one that I think we really thought, because Carolina went there, they had a great chance to actually land him, because they were putting on the full court press. But the fact of the matter is, he never visited Chapel Hill. And I don't really know how tied to Carolina he actually really was, because I think these other two schools had things pulling him there that we probably didn't talk enough about.
Yeah, there's no denying that. You have a prior established relationship with the Hall of Fame head coach and John Calipari. You are looking at potentially going back to play for your hometown school that also had made a pretty sizable NIL offer. And, we've talked about this the last couple of pods. I think it's worth mentioning. Carolina doesn't lack the financial resources to get the type of talent that they want. Like, if Carolina wanted to go and buy talent, they have the means to do so. That's not the way Hubert Davis is running the program. And you can agree or disagree with it.
Many seem to disagree, I think.
But it's why I think I stressed enjoying last year's team the way that I enjoyed last year's team. Because it's not a given that every offseason we're going to get transfers that, yes, are making money. Like, let's not get it twisted, guys. Harrison Ingram, Cormac Ryan, they made some money. Mm-hmm. But the driving force for them to come to Carolina was they wanted to be a Tar Heel. They wanted to wear that uniform, walk out of that tunnel, play on that floor, play in front of 22,000 of the best fans that the sport has to offer. But we're not going to get that every offseason. And, I think I was prepared to learn that lesson the hard way maybe next year or 2 years from now. We're learning that lesson this year because Carolina's returning the best player in the sport. They're returning a guy that's going to be the preseason National Player of the Year. You would think that would be enough to get high-caliber transfers like Clifford Amore, like Adou Thiero, to want to go play with him at Chapel Hill. Because if you're playing with that guy, it puts you in the running to compete for a national championship. That's no longer the case. And I'm not going to sit here and get upset about the kids making financial decisions. Because I think if I was 21, 22 years old and had the chance to make life-changing money, that would weigh hard. And that would
look, at 27, you would say no, right? You'd turn that down, right?
Exactly. So I think what's getting lost in the way that we see the feedback on the Facebook stuff and everything is I think the fan base has this belief that Carolina doesn't have the money. Guys, this is Carolina basketball. They've got access to as many resources as any program in the sport. They may not have the donors that Arkansas has, but if they needed to go get $2 million to pay a player, they could go get $2 million to pay a player. You need to look at the way that Hubert Davis is running the program, and he says it outwardly. He wants guys that are 2 feet in, that are committed to the University of North Carolina from a basketball standpoint, from an academic standpoint, and a community standpoint. Mm-hmm. The truth of the matter is, as much as I wanted Clifford Amore from a basketball standpoint, as much as I wanted an Adou Thiero from a basketball standpoint, those guys probably would not have been guys that had 2 feet in and had the Carolina experience Hubert Davis wanted them to have, and ultimately wouldn't have probably lived up and had the type of impact we wanted them to have because, just because Hubert Davis recruits you doesn't mean he's going to play you. Dawson Garcia is a prime example. Remember how celebrated of a transfer he was. The most heralded transfer of that transfer portal class, his first offseason as Carolina's head coach. Granted, an injury and family issues back home played a role in him leaving. But he was out of Carolina's rotation by the end of December. So, it's hard because Carolina hasn't landed the type of dudes they've wanted to land. But for the most part, Hubert Davis has gotten this thing right. And while it doesn't look like he's gotten it right so far this offseason, I still think a guy that's taken a team to a national title game with the benefit of a transfer, put together a team that was a number 1 seed in the tournament at the benefit of the transfer portal, deserves the benefit of the doubt. Something this fan base isn't known to do at time, every once in a while.
Well, the other thing is that, I mean, you look, especially when it comes to the big men, there are a lot of guys that are in the draft that are going through the process and still have until the end of this month, May 29th, to withdraw their name that are in the portal. So this is a whole different element. Last year, I think there were a few guys that did this. But this year, I mean, especially at the big man spot, it's just about every guy that's kind of on the bubble of being a drafted prospect. So you're talking Coleman Hawkins, who, by the way, I had someone tell me today that he is not built to play the center position, but that great Osabor from Utah State, who's 6'7", by the way. Coleman Hawkins is 6'10", 230, and played the 5 position at Illinois for each of the last 2 years at a pretty decent level. They tried to tell me that he should play at the 4 spot. So, yeah, people are a little bit crazy, but he is a big man, and he is a guy that if he was to pull out of the portal for multiple reasons would be a great pickup. Not just the player that he is, now not a great rebounder, but the attitude. You don't think that his fire would be something Carolina could really use with Ingram and Cormac Ryan departing? JT Toppin, the freshman of the year out of the Mountain West Conference, guy that could play the 5 position, rebounded really well out of that spot last year. In the draft, could pull out Dylan Mitchell, the big man from Texas. So we're talking about all of these guys that are going through the NBA draft process and could eventually pull out. And I'm going to be honest with you. To me, it's probably going to be 2 of those guys will remove themselves from the equation and come back. And maybe one guy stays in, because I've looked through all of the mock drafts when it comes to all of those guys. The only one that really appears anywhere is Dylan Mitchell, and he's a guy that's looked at as somebody that's drafted in the late 50s or undrafted. So I think there's a good chance all of those big men could be available. So that's the reason why you probably shouldn't panic. Same thing with Ugana Onyensu as well, another guy that I believe is in the draft right now. And it's the same thing at this 4 spot. And we'll talk about some of the names coming up here, but that's the reason why even this time, even from the last couple of years, it's different, and it's hard to really judge where they are at, where you would say, well, hey, last year at this time, Carolina had Harrison Ingram committed. They had Cormac Ryan committed. Yeah, they did, but they also, those guys like Cormac Ryan, I got to be honest, I'm trying to remember who else was really recruiting Cormac Ryan. I feel like the minute that he entered the portal, you knew he was landing at Carolina, which is very similar to Cade Tyson. And then, I mean, you talk about Paxson Wojcik. Well, yeah, of course, Carolina was going to add him. He was another guy that you knew the minute that he entered the transfer portal, we knew the connections to Carolina, that was probably the place that he was going to land. There were immediate rumors that was where he was headed. So, I mean, this time around, it's different. You guys, this is basically the same thing that we talk about on the recruiting trail, especially with the NIL stuff. You want to go after the big fish, then you better be prepared to, if you're going to go about it the way that Hubert Davis wants to, and I love that about Hubert Davis, wanting to find guys that fit right, then you're going to get rejected by a lot of these top guys because, yeah, as you said earlier, these are 19, 20, 21-year-old kids, some potentially even older than that are looking at this as an opportunity to make life-changing money, maybe because some of these guys may not end up playing in the NBA, or they're going to play over in Europe and they want to get their lives off to a pretty good start. So, I mean, yeah, I get it. I know there's a lot of people that are panicked, and I think this one today, we said it last night, this one scares me a little bit because I thought this was the guy that fit perfect to replace Harrison Ingram. Are there other options? Yes. But is there one as perfect of a fit as he is or as Thiero was to take over for Ingram? Probably not. The center spot, I don't know if anybody was truly what Armando Bacot was. You would have had to make some adjustments.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at Thiero, it's, you're just looking at a guy that if Carolina would have landed him, but you settle for whatever you get at the 5 spot, you still feel really good about what you did because you added the perimeter shooting that you needed in the form of K. Tyson. You got the wing to, help try to replace Harrison Ingram. Okay, that's fine. With Armando, Jalen Washington is a much more gifted offensive player, but isn't the defensive guy or the rebounding guy that Armando was. You could get that guy, though, that could come off the bench and be a nice rim runner that just protects the rim and grabs rebounds. I think what's surprising about Carolina's inability to land the stretch 4 is that's the one area that Hubert Davis has gotten right the most in the portal. Like, you got it right with Brady Manick. You got it right with Harrison Ingram. And when he's gotten it right, look at what Carolina's done. And
for all the flack that he gets, remember, at the time, because of who else was out there, he did get it right with Pete Nance.
Not to the extent that you got with Manick or Ingram, because look at the team success with Manick.
Oh yeah, but it wasn't. It definitely was not. It was the best that he could do at the time. Where right now, I mean, it feels like I think some people are wondering, will we even be able to get that guy at this point?
Yeah, the thing is that I bought into, man, you have the success twice in 3 years at that spot, which is proven to be the make or break spot for Carolina. When they get the production that they want, really, really, granted, even with Brady Manick, it was a run. We'll all take runs to the national title game no matter what the seed is. Ingram, from day one, you got it right. Put together a great regular season. You fall short in the NCAA tournament, which is why I think, oddly enough, replacing Ingram was the tougher and the biggest task for this team going into the offseason.
Oh, I agree with that.
As much as Armando Bacot accomplished, and you're talking about an all-time Tar Heel, the most decorated rebounder in Carolina basketball history, replacing Ingram was always going to be the key to this team potentially playing for a national championship next season, being a national championship caliber team. And I think that's why even though Carolina has swung and missed on more big man, it's reasonable to be upset about missing out on Thiero, because if you don't get this right, there's a really good chance that if Jalen Withers is your 4-man or whoever you bring in to be the 4 guy, because I still think no matter what, Carolina's going to bring in a 4 in some form.
Yes.
But if it's not the right 4, I think when we're looking back at next season, it won't be with the ending we all want it to be.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, because I mean, that's a spot that has been so important to be able to defend. There's a lot of very successful stretch 4s in this conference, and here's the thing to remember: that position next year, the top team in the conference, that's where the best player in most people's minds. We're seeing the hype already. That's where Cooper Flagg's going to play. And that's the guy that you're going to have to beat if you want to win the ACC regular season title. And, if you're going to get some revenge and win the ACC tournament title next year, more than likely, just from where we're sitting right now. And you could say whatever you want about, Duke's hyped in the preseason. Yeah, no, I agree with that. But this is a guy that is as highly regarded of a high school prospect as we have seen probably since LeBron James. Like, people really think this dude is as good as it gets. So for Carolina, I'm not saying you're building for one opponent, but you got to have somebody that can stop that guy. And there's other really good stretch 4s in this conference, as I said. So, I mean, it's important, man. And the thing is, right, I don't want to say, look, I think there's a role for Jalen Withers on this team next year. I think it can grow, because I think as you saw, that the season progress, you saw his role start to increase, and he played a big factor for Carolina in the tournament for a reason. There's a role here for him. He's a good defender. I think that I trust, if you have to start him or Jalen Washington, I trust Jalen Washington more in that 5 spot than I trust him at the 4. Like I do. I don't care that he's more experienced. I think there's more there. I think there's more overall talent for Jalen Washington. I think there's a chance that he has, can put on weight this offseason, that he can develop as a defensive player. Because I like some of the things that I saw from him as a rim protector. Like that area of his game's there. Rebounding, we've seen flashes. It's just got to be more consistent. And that could also be, that he doesn't have enough playing time out there. I think there's a possibility that he can develop into a serviceable 5. Now, that's the thing. Does that mean you're a Final Four team? No, it definitely does not. But I worry more about that 4 spot. But I'm with you. I think at some point they will bring some guys in, mainly because you look at the way this roster is constructed right now. There is no way they are giving scholarships to 4 walk-on players or 3 because they landed Cade Tyson. There's no way that the 3 remaining roster spots are all that are 3 remaining scholarships are all going to be walk-on players. If that happens, then it's time to be concerned. Like I've seen these people that are having this conversation today. Somebody asked it in one of these groups that I'm in, is this roster right now better than last year's roster? And I got to be honest, they just said that. They did not specify which sport. I said, are you talking football or basketball? Because there is absolutely no way in hell you could make a basketball roster right now is better than last year's. And they tried to talk about how deep the backcourt is. I mean, come on, are we being serious here? First of all, the guy, look, man, I told you last night how I think this backcourt has potential, but there is nothing guaranteed with a guy like Ian Jackson. Same thing with Elliot Cadeau taking the step forward that we want him to. And Seth Trimble making another leap. Like, this roster isn't even half of the roster that Carolina had last year. I'm sorry. Like, there is a long way to go here. But at the same time, I still feel like there's guys out there that we can be confident that Carolina can eventually land. I think right now, the other thing is we're talking about the urgency that we have as fans. You don't think that the urgency is there for the staff? They probably realize exactly what I just said right there. This roster as of right now is probably a roster that is lucky if they can make it to the second weekend of the tournament and lucky if they finish top 4 in the ACC.
Yeah. The biggest reason why they've got to find guys at the 4 and the 5 is to protect Withers and Washington, because at their best, they're impactful players, but they're guys that play 12 to 16 minutes a night.
Do you agree with me, though, that Washington, do you trust Washington to take more of a leap than Withers?
No, I don't.
You think Withers has a chance to be a better player? Because I think Withers is what he is, man. I think there's potential.
What he is a guy that, with his body, can be a great defender and a really, really good rebounder. Jalen Washington got pushed around by middle-of-the-road competition within the ACC.
By the way, you said a really, really good rebounder. This is a guy that at times during the season was lucky if he was scraping 2 rebounds while playing 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah, but you look at a box score, a lot of it was positioning, the fact that he played with another guy that was just a go-getter, that the ball found Harrison Ingram like maybe no other wing I've ever seen. Like, when he had to be a rebounder and he was there to rebound the ball, even though it was against Wagner, you put up a double-double in the tournament off the bench, that's no joking matter. You go back to that big offensive rebound he had at Duke in the regular season finale. That doesn't happen by accident. The Pittsburgh game in the ACC tournament, there were some plays where he was very much involved. So, but he doesn't have the offensive ability that Jalen Washington has because he's not a consistent shooter. So,
by the way, so James Bailey mentions James Brown. We talked about him the other night. Guys, he is as raw. I mean, he's more raw, I think, from watching him than Zayden High was last year. And that says a lot, man, because Zayden High was pretty raw when he came in. Do I think that he's a guy that you could throw out there at times and he'll show you flashes? Yes. That's not the solution in the middle. Like Jalen Washington combined with James Brown is not winning you much in the ACC at all. So,
and best case scenario, James Brown plays 6 to 8 minutes during the non-conference season. You don't see him during the ACC season. That's best case scenario.
Yeah.
We're talking about a borderline top 100 prospect.
And like Zayden High, man, like, look, I think it's possible that he takes a leap. But, I mean, the biggest thing is, I mean, there's concerns about some of the basic stuff with him. Like, we saw him last year. He came onto the floor. The dude literally couldn't go without picking up a foul for 30 seconds. Like, I mean, look, it's possible that he makes a leap. I like some of the things that he showed offensively. I like his fire, and that could be useful. But come on, man. Like, that is, you're asking a lot of those guys. We're asking enough for Jalen Washington to make a leap. But now you're expecting that Zayden High is also going to make a significant leap and James Brown's going to be better than expected. Like, that's why you've got to bring that. Both of these positions are crucial. Like, to me, I think you can get away with bringing in somebody at that 5 spot that is not a starter. And Jalen Washington, because of what he does offensively, can hold things down. I think that the 4 spot, I'm sorry, man, you need a starter there. You do.
Yep. And look, if Carolina was comfortable with what they had, guess what? They wouldn't have been as aggressive in the portal trying to find a big man, trying to find a wing. They know that they need help at those positions, and I still think they're going to find the help that they're looking for. It's just not going to be in the form that I think we all expected it to be once they got active in the transfer portal. When we come back, we'll talk quickly and briefly about some other guys that Carolina can and should turn their attention to at the 4 spot in the transfer portal. But first, we got to play you a quick word from one of our partners.
Maybe. No. All right. That's all right. You know what? The autograph.
Word from our partners.
Points for the acts of fandom they take every day, like listening to this show. The Autograph Fandom app gives you access to your favorite UNC content in one place and offers rewards like tickets, exclusive merchandise, and much more. You're already listening to our show, but now you can earn points and get rewarded for it. Head over to the Apple App Store and search for Autograph Fandom Rewarded and download it today for free using the referral code HeelTough. Link and code are also in our podcast description.
All right, you heard it right there, guys. Download the Autograph Fandom app. Use that referral code. Help us help you get rewarded for being a fan of us and, more importantly, a fan of the Tar Heels. Well, really quickly, what we're going to do is identify some other guys in the portal that Carolina can go after and should go after at the 4 spot. Of course, we talked about it briefly last night. Jalen Withers is back. He'll be back for his super senior season. And as of this moment, depending on what Carolina does, he would be your starting 4-man if the season were to start today. And depending on what Carolina does, that could still be the case. But I think if Carolina gets the type of guys that they want after missing out on Thiero, I still think Jalen Withers' best role would be coming off the bench. So, Anthony put together a list of dudes. There's going to be an article on the website, HeelToughBlog.com, of the 4 next guys that Carolina should target. So I'm going to turn it over to him and let him tell you briefly about each of those 4 guys.
Yeah, these are the 4 guys that I'm looking at here. And there's also, by the way, an article on the website for you guys to check out with the big men, if you're wondering about that, because I know we've seen a couple of questions there. But we're focusing on this 4 spot right now. And so the guys that I've kind of looked at, one guy we talked about last year before Carolina had landed Harrison Ingram, kind of was one of our secondary plans. Even then, when it looked like he was going to go to Kansas, was Arthur Kaluma, who was the transfer out of Creighton at the time. Well, he's coming off an even better year than when he entered the transfer portal last year. This past year at Kansas State, 14.4 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, shot 42% overall, and shot the ball better from the outside at 34.5% from deep. Not the greatest three-point shooter, but still serviceable enough, and a guy that is capable of scoring the ball, driving the lane, finishing, improved as a rebounder. Again, finding a guy that can rebound the way that Harrison Ingram did this past year is going to be tough, but the thing to remember is that Harrison Ingram, his numbers at Stanford, at least on paper, weren't quite the same numbers that he put up this year, so any of these guys are prone to a leap. Kaluma, also pretty serviceable player when he was at Creighton, averaged 11.1 points per game, 5.7 rebounds, shot 43% there, and 29% from three. That percentage, not great, but those 2 seasons at Creighton, pretty good. Another one that really interested me was Jalen Wells, the Washington State transfer. This past year, averaged 12.6 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, so not a great rebounder, but still has the size. Don't let it fool you. A guy that's 6'8", so the frame is there. 43.6% overall from the field. Most importantly, though, 41.7% from three-point range. So a guy that can score it, really good defender as well. Kaluma's a solid defender. Wells, pretty good defender. The thing about him, that was his first year at the major college basketball level. Spent his first 2 years at Sonoma State. But we've seen guys that have transferred up, and with those types of numbers for a tournament team, I think he's still worth looking at. Then you got a guy that played in the state of North Carolina that could be tied to the state, may want to stay around here. That's Trezarian White, the UNC Wilmington transfer. He averaged 19.8 points per game, 6.8 rebounds, shot 49.3% from the field, and 39% from beyond the arc. He was an all CAA member. The reason I say that, their conference, of course, changed names in between these past 2 seasons, but each of the last 2 years, he was an all CAA member. So really, he's a guy, another really solid defender. Biggest concern with him is coming up from UNC Wilmington. But the good news is that he has been at the major college level for 3 years now. So, he's a guy, even though that is a little bit of a transition coming up from UNC Wilmington, it's not unheard of. We've seen guys, remember Nick Timberlake from last year, who went to Kansas. Now, he wasn't great there, but that's still a guy that, if circumstances were a little bit different, it may have worked out a little bit better for him. And then the last guy is a guy that a lot of people probably remember from the tournament. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how much of a fit he really is. That's a chore. Now, I put him here because I think he's a guy that scores the ball the way that you want to. He plays like a stretch 4, but last year he was a guy that played the 5 at Samford. That'll work at Samford. The problem is when you saw it when they got to the NCAA tournament, he was effective, but still, you wonder how much he could actually handle playing that 5 spot if he was to get to a major conference team like Carolina. Last year averaged 16.1 points per game, 6.1 rebounds, shot 58.6% from the field, 43.5% from 3, but that was on a low amount of attempts. Biggest concern with him not only is coming up from Samford, but it's also the fact that was 1 year of production at Samford. The year before, he was a guy that came off the bench, was decent, but wasn't anything special. And then prior to that, he actually spent time at the Division II level. So, this would be a significant jump up for him. That's why I've got him towards the bottom of the list. I think the top 3 guys are really quality options for Carolina. Guys that I still think if Carolina was to land them, you should be excited about, but guys that probably don't give you the same type of defensive prowess that Adou Thiero does. But I will say this, those guys there, all 3 of them really, if you look at what they produced this year and even in the years prior, better than what Adou Thiero produced. So maybe leaning more of a guy that can help you on the offensive end than someone that can thrive on the defensive end.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt Arthur Kaluma would be the more coveted of this of these four guys. This was a guy I wrote an article about last year and really thought pre-Ingram Carolina should have gotten involved with. Kansas State didn't have the type of year that they were wanting to have following up their Elite Eight run from last year, but was a big part of the success that they did enjoy. Jalen Wells was kind of the second man for a Washington State program that made the tournament for the first time in over 15 years. And then when you look at White from UNC Wilmington, a big part of their upset of Kentucky in the non-conference season. For the most part, Arthur Kaluma, the worst of the three-point shooters, all three possess the ability to shoot the three ball at an efficient rate. You look at a core, very efficient. But again, that was at Samford. How does that translate to the power conference level over the course of 35 games remains to be seen. But Carolina is not in a position to be picky. And if that's the guy that they were to land on, that's a guy that Carolina would need to do their work to put him in the best position possible to get the most out of their talent. But that, of course, is the job of every single coaching staff. With that is going to wrap up this edition of the show. We'll be here both on the podcast and on the website with the latest and the next news that Carolina will be involved with in the transfer portal. So in the meantime, we're going to encourage you to visit the website HeelToughBlog.com. Go and read about Carolina missing out on Adou Thiero and what Carolina goes next. As we mentioned, there will be an article up about the wing players that Carolina should go after. There already is an article up on the site about which big man Carolina should go after. As we just simply encourage you guys to visit the website every single day to get the latest and the best coverage of Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners Podcast where we will pop up. We're there. We encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the basketball off season. Well, with that, guys, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. Do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.